Well, hello from Ottawa and welcome to Goldhawk Live on CPAC. On Monday, Jason Kenney, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, announced a ban on the niqab, burqa, or any other face veil during Canadian citizenship ceremonies. The Canadian Council on American Islamic Relations commented that the ban forces Muslim women to, quote, choose between their religious convictions and adopting Canadian citizenship. Meantime, a nationwide poll by Forum Research shows that 81% of those polled were in favor of the ban. What's your reaction? The number to call to reach us from coast to coast in Canada, 1-877-296-2722. That's 1-877-296-2722. Or you can email a brief comment to goldhawk@cpac.ca. My guest in studio here in Ottawa, Julia Williams, is here. She is Human Rights and Civil Liberties Officer with the Canadian Council on American Islamic Relations. Salma Siddiqui joins us as well. She is a past president of the Muslim Canadian Congress and vice president of the Circle of Canadians. Thank you both very much for coming in and being part of our program tonight. First, could I just get from each of you, in your own words, your own personal feelings and reaction to the announcement by Jason Kenney? Julia.
Well, I think that our organization was floored by the announcement. We didn't see this coming. We were disappointed by it. We think it's an unnecessary measure. That as long as a woman is identifies herself when she arrives at the ceremony, that she should be allowed to participate and give the oath with her face covering on. And we think it's, a way of sort of targeting minorities in an unnecessary way. And, it's just unfortunate.
Salma, your reaction when you first learned of this yourself?
As you said, I'm the past president of the Muslim Canadian Congress, and we have been asking for a total ban on the burqa. For some time we had been advocating that. So to us, this
do you include the niqab with that? The niqab and any face covering? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. So to us it was like, I'm not anymore active but on the Congress, but the Congress was elated. We were disappointed that it wasn't a total ruling for public space. Like,
as in France, something along the lines of the French legislation? Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly. Now, as far as, being a surprise, I think the debate has been on for a long time. And yes, the announcement was done it was a surprise, but it was a very pleasant surprise. Yeah. And I think the minister should have gone a little further.
Okay. To you, not a pleasant surprise, and literally there were no hints to the media either that this was coming. There were no advance press releases or anything of that nature. Out it came. Do you have any theories as to why now in particular?
Well, it could be just a matter, this is speculation of course, but it could just be a matter of, distracting people from other more important issues like Canada pulling out of Kyoto, like Attawapiskat, like really important issues. So to sort of pick on a small group of women who are already a minority within a minority, have come forward of their own free will to give an oath of citizenship to sort of say, we're going to bar you from this unless you adhere to this regulation, it seems to be going a little bit far in terms of infringements on personal liberties or freedoms in Canada.
From what we know of the circumstances surrounding the announcement by Mr. Kenney earlier this week, it seems as though he'd been hearing from some fellow MPs who had been attending citizenship swear-ins and saw some women with face veils taking the oath, and had other observations, supposedly, from some of the citizenship court judges. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I think if I may, elaborate a little bit on what Julia said. Kyoto is still alive. People are talking about Kyoto. The First Nation issue is still alive.
So you don't think the government's blowing smoke?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I certainly don't think.
Although the government does from time to time blow smoke, this is not one of those times.
This is what democracy is all about.
Yeah.
And the fact is that, when Julia talks about a minority of minorities, and that's where our problem is. This minority of minority is really coming out very strongly, and I think it has to stop.
Well, we've never based human rights on numbers. We've said everyone is everyone, regardless of numbers, regardless of how small the minority. We've said we must take care of all.
Absolutely, and how can anyone say this is a human right issue? Because their religion is not, practices are not being curtailed. The fact is that nobody has yet proven that this is a religious requirement, because this is not a religious requirement. And even the commentary after the minister announced this ban has been that there is no religious, nobody has proven that.
All right, just before I come back to you on that, Julia, Jason Kenney was on CPAC earlier this week speaking to our own Peter Van Dusen, and he spoke of some of the very issues that you're touching upon. Let's have a look at that clip.
This is about social cohesion. It's about reinforcing our democratic values. And let me be clear about one thing. This is not about freedom of religion. As one of our citizenship judges, originally comes from the Middle East, pointed out to me, women who go on the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, are not allowed to veil or cover their faces. They're required to show their faces. This is not a religious, but rather a tribal custom coming from certain societies where, let's face it, women are treated more like property than human beings. I don't think we want to be giving the imprimatur of Canada to that custom at the high moment of people becoming a citizen.
A tribal custom, says Jason Kenney. What do you say to that, Julia?
Well, I find it interesting that a government official would start making pronouncements about religions, and particular religions in Canada. I don't think that is the place of the government. I also don't think his opinion on the matter is particularly relevant. If the woman herself believes that this is sincerely held part of a religious belief, that's part, and she's performing this act as part of her religion, it has a nexus with religion, then she should be allowed to carry forward with that practice. It's not up to the government, it's not up to the immigration minister to dictate religious practices.
Well, and isn't it, could some not argue, and I'll put this back on you, Selma, could some not argue we don't really want the government to get in the business of telling us what we can wear?
Absolutely, and the government is not telling us what to wear, because this is not a religious requirement.
This is what not to wear, really, is what it amounts to. It's not what to wear,
exactly.
Right?
And the fact is that nobody can come, I don't think Julia can come and say anything that this is in the Quran. The Hajj, as the minister has said, is open-faced. The fact is men and women are walking side by side with totally showing their face. So what overrules that and brings us to this supposed, chosen religious...
Well, let's talk a bit about that. I mean, you're saying, no, this is not religious. Julia, you're saying it is religious.
I'm saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether or not Selma or Jason Kenney or anyone thinks it's not religious. The fact of the matter is you're not going to find many women walking around with face veils who aren't Muslim. So there is an interpretation within the Islamic faith that this is their requirement. And if they feel that it's necessary and a requirement of their faith that they wear a face veil in a public place,
so it's up to them to decide what their religion is. Is that what you're saying?
The courts have long since determined that this is, the determining factor. It's not up to courts in Canada. It's not up to the government of Canada to determine how people practice their religion.
Okay. To which you would say, Selma?
I don't think it's a religious practice. And I don't think they have been able to prove it. It's a cultural practice. And again, I will also bring it. What culture? We are in Canada. Let's talk about Canadian culture. It's not a Canadian culture practice. It's a practice that's being imported. And it's a very interesting debate. One can take years to come to that debate, because really there is no ground to what Julia is saying. If there is something...
What, in terms of the reasons for wearing?
Yeah, if the Quran says, yes, there is, then it's different.
Well, but I mean, even in the Christian Bible, not everything is necessarily mentioned in the Bible, and people do practice things beyond what's in the Bible as well, I think it's fair to say.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. But this is, again, if it was such a religious requirement, we would have been wearing that in the Hajj, and we are not. So I certainly think this is not even a discussion anymore.
Can we ask Julia about the reasons for wearing the niqab or the burqa? I think we can understand and appreciate it's up to the women themselves,
right.
But I think we would still like to know why. Why would you cover your face like that in public?
Right, right. And I think you can understand that it's very difficult for me to answer that question on behalf of those women. You know, you might find...
You mean there are varying reasons?
Sure. I mean, I think that, for example, I wear the Muslim headscarf, and, you know, it might have an interpretation for me within religion of, you know, modesty. It might be an interpretation within religion that has to do with my identity as a Muslim. And the reasons could be the same for a woman niqab. It could have to do with the way she feels modest in the way that she feels she needs to present herself to society. You know, whether or not we agree with this or think it's right or think it's even good for women is irrelevant. The fact is, in Canada, we also have a culture of human rights and freedom. And the fact that people make choices that might not even necessarily be good for them is not necessarily the issue. It's the issue of whether or not she should be allowed to do something as long as it is not harming other people.
But isn't all of this blurred and made complicated by the fact that the religious or cultural custom being observed here by some Muslim women involves covering the face? So we get into all the other ancillary identification issues as well, and the notion that, I don't know, is it a cultural tradition in Canada that we want to see somebody's face when we talk to them? I think that's the argument that the minister is making.
If I may take a little point from what Julia just said about her hijab and the modesty. Yes, that is exactly right. Modesty is what Islam teaches us. And the hijab is perfect, no problem at all. When she talks about her identity as a Muslim, there's no identity. These women are hiding their identity, and that's where the problem is. That takes us to your next question.
But they're not hiding the identity from themselves. They know who they are.
Then how do I know who they are? Don't you think it's a cultural thing that I need to... I'm looking at...
You see somebody walking down the street and they have a face veil, you want to see who they are?
I do want to see them, and why should they be seeing me from their slits?
Well, it's a cultural tradition to have beer on Canada Day, but that doesn't mean we're going to enforce that nationwide. I mean,
well,
the fact
I don't think it's quite the same, is it?
No, but I mean, if we're talking about you know, cultural values that we see as Canadian that we feel we need to impose on newcomers, I mean, we have to decide how far we think the government should be allowed to go to impose, quote unquote, some kind of conformity in terms of Canadian culture. I agree with the identity issue. When the woman comes to the ceremony, she needs to identify herself.
First to another female court official by raising the veil, but not in front of the whole court to say the oath. That's where you draw the line,
exactly.
Right?
I mean,
what about driving then? I mean,
well, hang on just a minute. Carry on with that.
Yeah, so once she's identified herself, we know who's here. She's come there of her own free will. I mean, generally everyone there, there's a presumption of sincerity. They've gone through the process. This is the last step to take the oath of citizenship. We know who she is. Let her take the oath.
The other issues involving identity, though, as Selma has just mentioned, a driving license, a health card, your passport. So the photos of Muslim women who use the veil have to be taken, and they take off the veil for officials who need to confirm the identity.
Exactly.
I mean, essentially that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's just that simple. I mean, first of all, it's always the right. Where are the responsibilities? There is responsibility to the society, right? And if one chooses to come to Canada, it's a Western country.
But I don't have a responsibility to other Canadians to explain who I am. Right? I don't. Somebody walking down the street, they have no right to know my name.
Exactly, because you know.
Unless I'm arrested or something, you know what I mean?
Definitely, I'm not going in that direction. But what I'm saying is, when the argument is that the newcomers who are coming in, they're coming very openly knowing where they are going. So the fact is, how much do you want to keep on going? Like, I mean, the burqa is totally out as far as I'm concerned, and many more. I was reading some articles yesterday, or letters yesterday, where non-Muslim Canadians are saying, well, we would like this discussion to go on. We are afraid not to discuss it of being named bigoted or politically incorrect. So I think this discussion has been on for a little while, and it's going to take more heat if one doesn't. I think the minister.
Well, there's enough heat on it right now, isn't there, with the minister's announcement?
He hasn't gone far enough.
But as far as you're concerned, well, and I guess if he went as far, if Jason Kenney or the government went as far as the government of France has gone, or the government of Belgium has gone, you would be totally outraged, I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, and
because that's a total ban.
And he certainly intimated that it might go in that direction, and that is frightening. In 2009, when there was issues in Quebec surrounding the face veil, several concerned community members sent a letter to the federal government saying, listen, what's the deal here? What are you prepared to do? Got a letter back saying, this is a free country, we don't tell women how we dress here, no worries. So if I send a letter now to Jason Kenney saying, well, what about my headscarf? Is this open enough for you in Canada? And he sends me assurances, well, forgive me if I'm not assured by that. What do we take at face value then? So there's a lot of concerns, and I think he intimated during the press conference that this isn't necessarily the first step. And I think that every Canadian should be concerned about that. Whether or not you believe in the face veil as a practice is not the matter. You can educate people to try to make better choices for themselves if you feel like that's the issue. But whether or not you feel the government has the right to step in and say, I'm making this decision for you, that's paternalism.
All right, let's go to the phones. We got a lot of people here who want to be part of this conversation. Here's Clarence calling from Dartmouth in Nova Scotia. Clarence, what do you think?
Well, I'd just like to reflect back to the old days when the cops and robbers of the Old West would have a mask over their face. I believe people coming to Canada should have their face, these burqas removed from their face so people can identify who they are under any and all circumstances. If you don't like the way it is in Canada, stay wherever it is that you practically wear it. That's my opinion. We've given up too many rights in Canada to satisfy people coming in from outside.
What right have you given up?
For example, right now can wish me a Merry Christmas because Muslims don't like it.
Well, sure they can, Clarence.
Our government stood up and said, stop it.
Clarence, anybody can wish you a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, sure.
Nobody's stopping you. Or nobody's stopping me from wishing you a Merry Christmas.
Tony has told people, don't wish Merry Christmas, okay? Listen, conform to Canada or stay out or get on the plane and take your mask off so they can identify you and go back home.
Clarence, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
Merry Christmas, Clarence.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Clarence.
I think that's a slightly different argument. Yeah. But I think Clarence is saying something that won't necessarily match the reality. There must be Muslim women in Canada who have taken up wearing the niqab and the burqa. Is that not true?
It's absolutely true. I know a woman, First Nation Métis, who wears the niqab. I mean, it's not. We are talking about an immigration matter here.
Understandably in this example,
but no, I mean, it's not a matter of just women coming from overseas and carrying forward this practice.
But Clarence also talks about the days of the Wild West when bandits covered their faces so as not to be recognized after they held up a train. But if in fact you do that, that's in the criminal code in Canada right now, covering your face and committing a crime. That's already there.
So can I make a comment on the...
Sure, you can make a comment on anything you want.
Thank you. Well, the fact that the women young women who are Canadian-born are wearing the niqab is where we are very concerned, because it's the imported culture, and again, that's a different debate. That's what is getting them to, or impressing them to do that. Who's teaching them what? This is where this whole debate on the burqa is. It's not just about the government telling us what to do and what not to do. We as Muslims are also concerned. There are many, many Muslims who don't even know about her organization or the Muslim Canadian Congress, who are doing everyday job, who want to work as Canadians and work and say Merry Christmas to our last caller. No problem. But the fact is, it is the young people who are converting and who are buying this ideology. And the burqa is an ideology. It's a political statement that is taking over this burqa.
Let me stop you right there. Is it a political statement to wear the burqa or the niqab?
Well, I think, I'm not going to dismiss that, but at the same time, we can't always treat everything as being mutually exclusive. You could be wearing it because it's part of your...
I'm just asking for a simple answer to the question. Is it a political statement?
Is it a political... No, I mean, it's a religious practice that someone might say, I'm also wearing as a political statement. You can't just say,
there you go. Well, if it's a political statement, what is the statement? What's it saying?
It's the ideology that is being imported on Wahhabism, Salafism, You may disagree. That is exactly what, and when you say, you did agree that it's a political
those are
statement.
issues that speak to gender inequality? Is that what you're talking about?
You know what? There is a gender inequality, and there is willingness by these young women to accept burqa. And again, it's not only about oppression. It's about the neo-Islam.
But if a young woman born in Canada decides to wear the burqa, it's really none of your business, is it?
It is not my business, but why is she wearing it? Who's telling her?
Well, but I mean, why am I wearing a suit and tie?
You're not covering your face. This is not a cultural identity issue that we are talking about. What we are saying is that the burqa is not just about newcomers coming in. If the women here are wearing it, and they're making a political statement that it is the new Islam that they want.
Does it counter the argument that has been made by Salma and many others in the last week or so, in fact over a longer period of time, that it's a sign of gender inequality, wearing of the burqa, wearing of the niqab? How do you counter that argument?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the issue of whether or not women are forced to be wearing this as a matter of gender inequality, like I would simply say that a husband or brother or father doesn't have the right to tell a woman what to wear as a man, and Jason Kenney doesn't have the right to tell a woman what to wear as a man. Whether or not, the niqab is good for women and women's equality, I mean, that's a separate debate, right? I think that the notion of removing from a woman her freedom to choose her own life, her own business, her own way of dressing would be a greater harm. I mean, removing that freedom would be a greater harm to women's equality than allowing her to, live her life the way she sees fit. Your disgust at a way another person chooses to live is not a reason to restrict their personal freedoms. You can try to educate them to make better choices if you don't see this as a good decision, but there's a difference between that and coercing someone to behave in a certain way.
But in some Muslim countries, coercing women to wear veils and that sort of thing, I think of Saudi Arabia as a perfect example. I mean, I think people automatically equate those two things and think that that kind of thinking is being brought to Canada, and that's what upsets them.
Right.
You can understand that.
Oh, absolutely, I can understand that. And the fact that the Saudi government forces women to behave a certain way isn't a reason to turn around and say, well, Canada can then force the women to behave a certain way.
And that's not exactly what is happening. Jason Kenney is not some husband or another man. He is an official of this government who is making the law for this country, which is, in their opinion, good for the future of this country. And that is where the difference should be.
Okay, let me get back to the phones. A lot of people here. Bob is calling from Wolfville in Nova Scotia. Bob, what are your thoughts?
Well, should I go to live in another country, I would expect to abide by their rules and regulations.
Yeah.
So why not immigrants entering our country respect our rules? It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Bob says it's simple. What do you say, Julia?
Well, I think that it's very important for people to recognize that this country is an amazing country because we have important rights and freedoms in this country. We don't force people to conform to a mold when they step in the front door in Canada. We have rights and responsibilities as citizens, but as long as our actions as individuals aren't harming other people, we have no business as fellow citizens or as a government to enforce behaviors on certain people.
Well, who makes the law? The government makes the law. And definitely there is a reason and need to be discussing this and banning it, as far as I'm concerned, the burqa.
Well, that's the next chapter, should that ever come. Here's Robert calling from Toronto. Robert, your thoughts, please.
Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Hello. I think it's sort of unfortunate that the woman there that was the president of the Muslim whatever, I think it's sort of sad that she's adopted that view. In my opinion, people come to Canada to be free, and for her to lump everybody, like for her to say that wearing the niqab or the hijab or whatever is part of, their oppression, well, maybe that's not how they feel. Maybe they feel like they wanted to come to Canada so they could vote or drive a car or go somewhere without a male relative, and maybe they want to wear the veil or the thing. Like, maybe they want to do that, and I don't think that Canada should dictate. We certainly make a lot of concessions for other people, like the Sikhs that wear the knives under the outfit, the RCMP officers that wear a turban instead of the cap.
Yeah.
How come we're not coming down hard on everybody? We make concessions all the time, and it's about accepting and loving everybody. And Canada is a melting pot of every culture, and just to go after the Muslims like this, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Every argument that woman has put up has been shot down about, I mean, nobody's saying that they don't want to identify themselves in a situation that is legal or lawful or whatever.
Well, they're compelled to,
they want
aren't
to walk around that way,
Yeah.
and who cares?
All right, Robert, thank you very much. Back to you, Salma.
Well, it's very interesting and a very good message of love and peace, no doubt about that. However, I did not talk, I think he took the message a little wrong. I was not saying they're oppressed. If they want to come into this country, anybody, it's not just about any immigrant that wants to come has to abide by Canadian law. It's as simple as that. And this discussion is about the burqa and the niqab, and there is a law right now that is asking for certain adherences, and that's the way we are going. And I will stand by that. Covering your face and talking to people, I don't think it does any good for anyone. So,
Julia?
Well, again, I mean, the fact that Selma doesn't like it is not a reason to ban it.
No.
I mean, we have
the
personal
whole
religious...
Congress doesn't like it as well. I mean,
it's not just the Congress.
Yeah.
It's not, as Julia said, that some of the community members sent letters to the government. Some of the members on the other side of the Muslim community and non-Muslim community sent letters to the government. So this is democracy, and there is freedom, and there are two thoughts, no doubt about that, and that's what we are discussing. So it's not Salma saying that. If it's only Salma saying that, or the Congress saying that, I think that's a bit too far. But the fact is, the Canadians see this need, and that's why this debate is going on.
Julia?
I think the majority of Canadians see this need, and we always need to be careful as a nation of the tyranny of the majority. We protect our minorities in this country. We have freedoms and rights in this country because we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. We don't coerce people into certain behaviors because the majority doesn't like it. If your behaviors are not harming someone else directly, you should be free to do and live as you choose.
Help me understand this, and help the rest of us across the country understand the nub of the issue here when it comes to removing the veil as you recite the oath of allegiance to Canada. The Muslim woman will raise the veil for identification purposes to a government official in many different instances, but you're drawing the line at the ceremony because there are many people around? Is that part of it?
I'm sure.
Is that the difference?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of it. I mean, when a woman removes her niqab, for many of them, they feel as though they are removing an item of clothing and that they're in a certain state of nakedness. You know, whether or not we can comprehend that or think that's right is a separate issue, but for them, that's a genuine feeling and emotion. There's media present when they give the oath. There was a woman who called our office and said that, she had been fine with media presence there, but when she heard the announcement about having to remove her niqab, she was very frightened that, not only did she have to remove it in front of everyone in the room, but the media was going to be there, and her date now to take her oath has been moved, and she doesn't know what she's going to do, and she's devastated.
Well, the consequences here, let's be clear for everyone, the consequences of not revealing your face when taking the oath is you do not get your Canadian citizenship.
So we have a minority
revert to permanent resident status, and you don't get all the other rights and privileges of being a Canadian citizen.
So we have a minority being denied citizenship on a technicality that, if the real issue was whether or not she's taking the oath, can be very easily accommodated.
But if women outside the country were told, and I think somebody made this point, we're told that upon coming into the country and upon getting their citizenship, they would have to remove their face covering, would that somehow change the situation or make it more acceptable to some women? That it isn't suddenly foisted upon them, and you can certainly argue the announcement does that, okay, bang, everybody has to lift the veil. But if it's now known Doesn't that make it a different circumstance?
Yes, they might have more time to accustom themselves to the fact that they will be naked for a section while they're there.
Is that really how they refer to it, as being naked?
A lot of women would consider this appearing in a sort of state of nakedness.
I think I need to come into this now, because I've been quite... First of all, if I may, CAIR-CAN is known to exaggerate a lot. One woman calls their office to say this is happening. We don't even know who this woman is, okay? But I find these veiled women gladly appearing in front of the media. Yeah, the media cannot see them, but we can see their eyes, and they're looking at us, or are looking at you and doing... I think this is not an argument. This is not even makes any sense. So this thing about they're naked, I think that is ludicrous. I think that we should be really careful in exaggerating the fact that they are naked. I mean, maybe we're naked in front of them, but I think that this argument is a stale argument, and I think should not be discussed.
Well, I think you asked the question of how a woman might feel having to remove her niqab.
Yes, I think we'd like to know, and that's how they'd feel.
And the genuine answer is that many would feel that it's like revealing themselves in a way that we might feel taking our shirt off in public. Again, I might not understand that. I clearly don't feel naked walking around with my face uncovered. The fact that I don't necessarily empathize with that emotion doesn't make it very real. I mean, that's not very real for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Am I hearing speculation? I mean,
well, you speculate too. Everyone gets to speculate. Are you going to sit here in judgment of who's speculating and who's not? We all speculate. That's what we do. And we're going to do more of that, speculating, with our calls from across the country right after this message. Don't go away.
A cynic is a man who, when he smells the flowers, looks for a coffin.
The challenges our country faces are immense.
It takes time to build consensus.
It's the program that's never at a loss for words. Podium. See it on CPAC.
This week on Beyond Politics.
If I'm going to be a member of Parliament, I need to think of myself as a member of Parliament. I need to commit to that. I need to set the farming aside.
Join host Catherine Clark for Beyond Politics. See it on CPAC.
On the next Rockburn Presents.
I spent a couple of years asking myself on a nearly daily basis, what is the death penalty for?
Join me, Ken Rockburn, for Rockburn Presents, only on CPAC.
Hello, I'm Martin Stringer, and I'd like to tell you about something new at our CPAC website. It's called Ask Martin Stringer. Just click on the menu and choose a topic that interests you. It could be a question about parliamentary rules or procedure, or an interesting piece of parliamentary history or tradition, from whipping the hounds to whipping MPs. And you can ask a question of your own, and I'll do my best to answer it. Often when someone has a question about something here at CPAC, they say, Ask Martin Stringer. Well, now you can too. That's Ask Martin Stringer on our CPAC website.
You're watching Goldhawk Live, only on CPAC.
We're back, and we're talking about Jason Kenney's announcement on Monday of this week that Muslim women, mostly Muslim women, that's who it will be applicable to, will not be able to wear the niqab or the burqa while taking the oath of allegiance during a citizenship ceremony. Let's go to the phones and get some more opinions on this. Here is Margaret calling from Truro in Nova Scotia. Margaret, what do you think? Are you there, Margaret? Nope, not there. All right, let's go to Stanley calling from Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario. Stanley, how do you feel? Stanley?
Hi, Dale.
Hi.
And I'm your esteemed guest there. It's a difficult situation, and it's going to continue to be that way. However, I think most Canadians love newcomers coming to this country. There's no doubt about that. For such a small issue, to take your picture on your driver's license, your health card, or whatever it is, that is really no big deal. And I think this is really, really blown out of proportion. And I hope that people come to a consensus that that's all there is to it. As far as fashion and style, after getting your identity known in this wonderful country, then you could do whatever you want. And thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Stanley. This is not then, the debate we're having is not about identification. It's about customs, religious or otherwise, is it not?
Yes.
It's not really about identification.
No. I mean, I think if there's a necessity for a woman to be identified, whether it's at an airport for a driver's license photo, she should have to identify herself. I mean, this is common sense. But if her actions aren't harming anyone in a different context, for example, giving a citizenship oath, then leave her alone.
Well, it's a very interesting subject that just a point that it just has come up. There are incidents at the airport, which I don't know if CAIR-CAN hears about them, but
You heard about them.
Well, I own a travel agency.
Are you conjecturing on this?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
So the fact
You're
is,
speculating on this?
No,
Okay.
I'm not. I maybe it's because I'm hearing a third.
I'm just trying to make a point. That's
Which
all.
is
Go
fine.
ahead.
Which is fine. And the fact is that there have been cases where women have said they're not going to show their face. One or two. I'm not saying there are many.
You mean to a customs official or something like that?
No, to the airline officials.
Well, then they're in trouble. They don't get on the plane, do they?
No, they have.
Yeah.
They have.
Yeah.
And because exactly of this fear of being, annoying them, or fear of being incorrect. So, there are issues. I mean, there are two sides, and that's clear here, So it's not good enough what the government is doing for Julia.
Well, I mean, Julia's, and I'll go to Julia on this. I mean, you're never going to say that a Muslim woman wearing a niqab isn't required to identify herself to authorities or to board an aircraft. That's the law. You got to show your face, right?
Right.
No problem with that.
No.
How do I know that it's not a Muslim woman? It could be another person going in the niqab.
Well, if somebody,
exactly.
You're right. But the rules and regulations, such as we have them, would not normally allow that person to get on a plane, if that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to the lines. Here is Don calling from Ottawa. Don, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a matter of control that they're having for that religion. And I don't think if they come to this country, they should definitely be able to make our customs apply, and never mind trying to change new rules for every organization that comes, or a country that sends people over here. We've already been here for 100 years or more, and why are we changing all the rules to affect these new people? To me, wearing this costume, whatever you want to call it, is simply about control over the women. And the ones that are highly educated are helping them push it along. And when they're young, the new people think it's wonderful to try it for a while. That's my opinion. I think we should just leave the way we are. If you don't want to abide by the rules we have, why are we changing so many? There's lots of people who want to come here. This is a great country. There's lots of people who want to come here and don't want us to change all our rules.
Well, it's a great country because we welcome people from everywhere, don't we?
Well, that doesn't mean we want to have every day October the 31st.
Sorry?
That's because, and we don't want to have every day October the 31st. Halloween.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Don. Okay. Let's go to Anna calling from Montreal. Anna, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi.
I believe Ms. Williams' logic is a little bit faulty. First of all, I think that this issue is really being overblown. I cannot pronounce on whether, it's a question of religion or whatever.
Yeah.
But may I remind you all that a few years ago, the majority, because Ms. Williams spoke of the tyranny of the majority of people smoked. The majority of people did not wear a seatbelt, here in Canada. And at a certain point, the governments, various governments at various levels, decided to pass certain regulations. And even though people squawked at the beginning, they all adapted. Now,
but I mean, Anna, to be fair, what's smoking and seatbelts got to do with wearing a veil?
If you're talking about individual choices, people being able to make individual choices, okay? And a certain number of people wish to make those choices, as Ms. Williams argued. Well, you know, in this case, it's simply a regulation that people, they are making the choice of becoming a Canadian citizen. The regulation is you show your face. After you leave the court or wherever it is that the swearing in takes place, you can don your niqab in all freedom. But while you're there, swearing to, you know, to become a Canadian citizen, you have to take it off. You know, don't overblow it. Don't dramatize it.
Well, by the same token, Anna, it's neither a health issue nor a safety issue, is it?
Well, listen.
Those are your examples. That's why I'm asking.
No, in a sense, it is a kind of a health issue, because even though Ms. Williams is arguing that women may feel naked, my heavens, you know, like when your own breasts, you know, we're so concerned about carbon dioxide emissions. When you are breathing out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. So covering your face, in effect, you're making yourself breathe in that.
Okay, all right, Anna. All right.
Well,
all right, no, I get it. That's closer. That might be a closer example. Let me ask Julia about that. Are women who wear veils worried about their carbon dioxide?
I don't know. You might want to ask surgeons who wear masks or the dentist if he's concerned.
Yes, but a surgeon does not wear a mask all day long. Come on.
No, but I mean, the idea of that is that you're preventing the transmitting of infection by wearing a mask. So the idea that she's having kind of no, I'm sorry.
Okay. Any thoughts on that before I go? I don't know where to go with that. Here's Danielle calling from Vancouver. Danielle, what are your thoughts?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, my thoughts. I have to say this quickly in 2 seconds when it's been on our minds for 20 years. We are in Canada. I, myself, being a Canadian woman, have certain rights and freedoms. Yeah. And I have the right to not see that on my streets. I think we're being played. And yes, we have all sorts of people here in Canada, but it's as Canadians. As Canadians. When in Canada, do as Canadians do.
Yeah, but we all came, unless you're talking about the First Nations, we all came from somewhere, didn't we?
No, but listen to me. This country was built by us who are here now, our ancestors. And all the countries in the world have been built by immigrants and ancestors of the people who live there now.
And this boils down to you not wanting to see somebody wear a face veil walking along the sidewalk.
I do not wish to live a Muslim life in my country. I do not wish to have my rules and laws and ways of life changed by Muslims where they can live here, but as Canadians, I don't need to have all my rules changed. We are in Canada. If they want the Muslim way of life, there are plenty of countries up there with the rules and laws in place already.
All right, Danielle,
that's all
thanks.
I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Here's Amir calling from Winnipeg. Amir, what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, I would like to thanks for an amazing show you guys have today. And my question is, I just want to know, is covering your face, is this brought from any traditional thing? Because it's nothing to do with Islam.
Well, all right, more of the origin of it. All right, Amir, thank you for that. Can we go back on that? What is the origin of covering your face? Do you know?
I
Who
have
knows?
no idea. I mean, the country like Saudi Arabia, that's a Muslim country, imposes this on women. There are women who are not from Saudi Arabia who come from various cultural backgrounds, including Canadian cultural backgrounds, who adopt this practice because they see a nexus with the Islamic faith. Where it comes from, it's not relevant in terms of her right in this case.
Amir's just asking. That's all. He just wants to know where it comes from. All right.
It's very relevant.
Where does it come from?
Well, as Julia tried to explain, it stems from Saudi Arabia. And why are we living in Saudi culture? This is not just, that's where the biggest problem is. Why are we living in Saudi culture? Why is this all of a sudden the rush for burqa? It's not just an issue of tradition. It's a political statement, and that's where it's coming from Saudi Arabia. Why should we be taking their culture? Yes, Canadian women, but why should we be taking Canadian culture?
I guess it's fair to say the idea some of the idea of covering the face comes from Saudi Arabia, at least historically.
Came from Saudi Arabia. So.
Well,
but Islam came from Saudi Arabia, and Islam has got the one of the highest pillars, the Hajj, did not demand a face covering, so it goes back to the same old thing. But I do want to make a quick comment on one of the last callers, Anna, who said Muslims and Canadians, they are not different. We are Canadians. So
well, I don't think that's exactly what she said, but yeah, okay. She says, I don't want to see that walking down the street.
Fair enough.
Is what she said.
Yeah, okay.
Would you agree with that kind of statement?
Absolutely.
You don't want to see that walking down the street?
See what?
See someone in a veil walking down the street.
I do agree with that.
Okay.
You don't have a right in Canada to not be offended by other people. People do things all the time in Canada that offends us. This is not the litmus test by which we restrict personal freedoms.
All right, let me get back to the phones on that. Here's Joanne calling from Windsor. Joanne, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I'll make it short and sweet. It's I just feel if they have a strong enough desire to become Canadians and to have access to all that Canada has to offer to them, then they seem to fail to realize that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. And so if our government is saying that the niqab and burqa should not be worn during taking the oath of citizenship, then there shouldn't be any question.
Joanne, let me ask you one other question related to that. If young Muslim women who were born in Canada decide for various reasons to wear the niqab or the burqa, how do you feel about that?
I can't say I'm in favor of it, but they will not be taking the oath of citizenship.
No, they're already citizens.
Canadians.
They're already
citizens.
citizens.
If you choose to be a Canadian, become a Canadian, then abide by the rules for taking the oath of citizenship.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
You're welcome.
Any thoughts? Shall I go back to the phones?
I mean, if the fact that she's wearing a niqab wasn't a bar to her citizenship up to this point, and when she leaves the room, she can continue to wear her niqab, it's nonsensical that they're saying you have to take it off at this moment. Again, if the issue is we don't know she's taking the oath, that can be easily accommodated. But if it's simply a matter of, I feel this is what's best for her, and this is what Canadian culture and values are.
The government's always telling us what's best for us, isn't it? In so many different ways?
I hope.
The government's always telling us that in many, many different ways, in many, many different laws. Is always telling us what to do or telling us what's good or what's bad, what's allowable and what's not allowable. Don't governments do that?
Absolutely. And
I'm not saying they should in this case, but they do. Governments do that.
Exactly. And the fact is that many people would not like what the government is saying on different issues.
Of course.
So
you differ on what the government decided on Monday.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Here's Peter calling from St. Catharines in Ontario. Peter, what do you think?
Nice to talk to you, Dale.
Well, nice to talk to you, Peter.
I'm astounded at how ignorant some of the calls are. I am all for wearing the veil. Why not? What are they hiding under there? I'm tired of Mr. Harper, Mr. Kenney taking orders from possibly some other government. This is what you're going to do. Let me ask you a question. The last time there was a citizenship ceremony, and a Muslim woman had to wear or wore a niqab, did they? Is this policy just instituted since Monday?
No, are you saying that did they wear their niqabs and take the oath prior to Monday? Of course. Yes, they did.
So what's the problem?
They have been.
What's the problem? Are they hiding a bomb under there? No. I mean, come on. I'm looking at Miss Siddiqui and I'm thinking, lady, you look like you color your hair. What are you hiding? Are you hiding just gray hair?
Now, Peter, don't get personal. Do you color your hair, Peter?
No, I'm bald.
All right. Okay. All right, Peter. Thank you. Thank you very much. Peter's saying, we're making such a big deal out of this, to which you would say...
He's a minority. He's a minority.
He's a minority.
Yes, and I do go to a very good hair colorist.
All right, fair enough. Here's Leslie calling from Halifax. Leslie, your thoughts, please.
Yes. Where in the Quran does it say that you have to wear the niqab? I read the Quran. It says dress modestly and cover your hair.
Yeah.
There is no requirement to wear a face veil or a burqa.
Okay, thank you very much for reminding us of that.
I really feel that they're doing Muslim women a disservice by covering.
All right.
Because it scares other cultures.
All right, Leslie, thank you very much. Is she correct about her reference to the Quran?
I'm not an Islamic theologist.
Oh, so you don't. Is she correct about that?
I will go with Julia. I'm not a theologist, but whatever I've heard, yes.
Well, somebody must have leafed through a Quran here. Right?
I can tell you that there is more than one interpretation. So there are some people, for example, who say, you know, it doesn't say in the Quran that you even need to wear a headscarf. There are some say that it says in the Quran you need to wear a face veil. So there are several different interpretations.
This has been debated, has it?
So here, if that is like...
Well, you just a minute ago you said you weren't an expert, and now you're going to deny her interpretation.
I said I'm not.
All right, okay.
2009, Mr. Tantawi, Sheikh Tantawi from Al-Azhar University, which is the authority for Sunni Islam, where Saudi Arabia is supposed to be that way, he said there is no reason for the burqa.
Well, that's another opinion then, isn't it?
He's a scholar.
Yeah,
he's a scholar.
But
so
there are many opinions. My point is there are many opinions on this. Both sides, are there not?
I haven't heard the other way
There are
around.
many opinions, and it's not just from individuals. There are scholars who think it's obligatory. Again, right or wrong, it's just one opinion.
But you do hear the words, as the caller noted, Leslie noted, modesty and covering of the hair, which speaks earlier to some of the principles involved behind wearing the veil in the first place, right?
But I mean, there are references in the Quran to covering the face, as I understand it, referring to the wives of the Prophet, and this is where the interpretation comes from, where people find it
Well, you just told me you weren't you weren't familiar with the Quran, and now you're saying it's not there.
I'm not an expert.
Exactly that.
I'm not an expert.
All
That's
right,
what
but you're that much of an expert, you know this is wrong.
A wife of the Prophet was not covering her face. So
okay, well, all right, we'll have to take what you're saying at face value. Here's, let's see, Suzanne calling from Edmonton. Suzanne, what would you like to add to this conversation, please?
Sure. I'm glad to be a female caller. I'm glad to be calling from the prairies in Canada. I work at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, and just sort of to set the tone, because everything in life is about perception. I'm a single female in my 40s, single parent, working full time, take courses part time.
Yep.
And I know for myself, the conversations I've had with my own daughters who are in their 20s, and one is a recent master's in public health grad, and from coworkers who are mostly females in their 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., educated. It's just sort of, I think we have a perception of, the veil representing the oppression of women and the degradation of women. And I know when I went to listen to Stephen Lewis speak on my campus, 4 or 5, 6 months ago, he really reiterated that the biggest crisis in the world right now that we all have to be concerned about is gender disparity, or more specifically, the oppression of women. And again, I think, it's not about any religion at all, because I think, especially working on a campus, you see so many cultures and religions and races and different varieties of people and immigrants, and I embrace that. I think it's great. I think it just sort of adds to the fabric of our society. But again, as a female who's self-supporting, self-sufficient, self-reliant, autonomous, for me, I think it represents a certain amount of discomfort, because I feel like it represents the oppression of women in general. And again, but then if you're also to look at sort of a practicality side, I mean, Edmonton, probably like a lot of cities in Canada, is just rife with runners in our river valley. And, I think for a woman now to go out and be a runner or participate in any sport or to be an athlete, I mean, it's definitely going to be an impediment. It's going to be cumbersome. And then again, I think all of the countries where women are primarily veiled, again, these are countries where we so often see horrific crimes committed against women that are government sanctioned. So once again, it's this association of the veil and what it means for women in general. And I think it sort of represents, for a lot of us, Canadian, North American, Western civilized women, it represents sort of the demise of women as opposed to our evolution, and oppression, degradation. And it's more disempowering than empowering.
Joanne, thank you very much for your thoughts. Julia, Joanne, when she sees the niqab or the burqa, her first impression, her first thoughts are of oppression.
And I mean, I can understand that sentiment. I mean, when we see media images of women wearing niqabs or burqas, it's usually women from Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia. And these are places where women's freedoms and rights are severely restricted.
Yes.
And that is terrible and offensive to women all over this world. I think that there is a risk, though, of making the assumption that in a free country in Canada, like Canada, that the same oppressions exist for these women. The fact of the matter is, in Canada, we are allowed to make free choices about how we practice our religion, how we live our life, even if these practices are offensive to other people. And they should have the freedom to adhere to that practice if they sincerely believe that it's necessary for them.
Again, the caller says when she sees niqabs, when she sees face coverings, she thinks of oppressive regimes, and it leaves with her a very negative impression of the whole thing.
I think that's a common feeling people have, and that is what people are, Canadians are saying that about Muslim women or this veil covering or the face covering. And I couldn't agree more with her, but yeah.
This is something, is this something that needs a lot more discussion? I mean, it's, I mean, we make veiled, if you pardon the expression, we make veiled references to it from time to time when we talk of immigration issues and other issues, and now we have the ruling about the niqab and the burqa. All of these things, they do need more discussion in this country, do they not? Would you both agree with that?
I think if there's a proper discussion and, you know, people are, you will see that majority will go the way we want to go.
But what you want is for the government to tell women what they can and what they cannot wear in public. If you got what you wanted, that would be banning these face coverings in public. That's where you want to go, right?
What we want is someone, whoever we are talking to, we want to see who we are talking to. And the fact is, it goes against the Muslim woman as well, because who knows behind those veils, someone else is doing something, and that comes on the Muslim woman. So.
Yeah, but this, I thought this wasn't about identity. I thought it was about custom, religious, social, cultural, or otherwise. Julia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all in agreement on the identity issue. You know, if there's a reason that a woman needs to identify herself for security or whatnot, I mean, she needs to.
But if you're wearing a veil and coming down the street towards me, I have no right to have you identify yourself to me. I'm just an ordinary
citizen. If there's a security, like you're at an airport, you're at a border crossing, if there's a reason why, for security measures, you need to identify. When you arrive at your citizenship ceremony, we need to know who's taking the oath.
Yeah.
We're not just going to make the presumption that it is who it is. Yes, identify yourself, but
for sure.
After that,
it's important in the security conscious world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But after that, don't tell me how to dress.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I can assure you on one thing, is if there is a security breach, again, we are talking about a little bit of the fact that identify yourself. If somebody comes
but we're going beyond it. I thought we decided early on this wasn't a question of identity.
So
you said it was
religious.
A question of custom.
This is not religious,
but
and this is not a Canadian custom.
Okay.
So that's where my stand is.
Okay. Thank you both very much for coming in and talking. This is a difficult subject, isn't it? Do you not think so?
No, I think definitely. I don't think this is where it's going to end.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure this isn't where it's going to end. Yeah.
Where do you think it's going to end?
That'll be for another show.
Okay.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you after the Christmas and holiday break. We'll see you on January 15th. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday.
CPAC is World Issues. CPAC, Real-Time Politics.
Its agencies, bills, and